the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
This is HBR News number 197. Jussie Smollett is the black prankster in Nigeria Forevah, where we reflect on the stories of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. I hope you're doing well. My name is Brian, and I am joined by, as always, my esteemed panelists, Hannah and the two mics. We have a great show lined up for you guys today, and we're not going to waste too much time since we did so much struggling with open broadcaster software. I don't know why that was. So please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat as well as the comment section. On this week's HBR News Show, we'll be talking about the epic Jussie Smollett saga, one that I never thought I'd be talking about, the flaming pile of garbage known as Gizmodo, Terry Crews's statements about the cult of masculinity, and more. So stick around, it's going to be a good time. And please be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only after show. Riley Cooper is described on CuriousMindMagazine.com as a professional writer who writes informative and creative articles on topics related to various fields of study. Written with love and enthusiasm, her articles inspire readers to broaden their knowledge of the world, think, and get ready to act. So we're going to read an article that she wrote entitled, "Enough is Enough, I'm Done Waiting," because that sounds just like love and a deep desire to broaden your knowledge. Anyway, if you'd like to participate in our after shows, either as an audience member or a participant, please consider becoming a supporter, or better yet, a badger, by going to feedthebadger.com. So you can set up a monthly subscription at feedthebadger.com that will give you access to the Discord and our after shows. You'll be able to talk with us and lots of other little perks here and there, depending on what level you operated at. It also gives you access to bonus content, extra shows. And it's good for everybody. You get to watch videos before other people do. So yeah, do that. Go to feedthebadger.com. Don't even bother with Patreon. We're not even going to push that anymore. If you're on Patreon, that's fine. You can use it, but we're not even going to push that anymore. No more plugging of Patreon. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find yourself unable to find our content because YouTube finally dropped the axe on our channels, go to badgerfeed.com. That's badgerfeed.com. One last thing you may have heard about, the International Conference on Men's Issues 2019 has been announced. The Honey Badgers, us, we are going to be putting it together. We are taking the reins this time, and it will be in Chicago, Illinois. If you want to go to the ICMI, and you know that you do, because we're going to have a lot of great stuff, lots of guests. We've already got essentially a full men's conference. Now we're just building up on the cultural conference, the cultural stream, where we'll have stuff that's a bit broader in content that's also going to be really exciting. You want to join the email list. At the very least, join the email list. Find out what's going on, with the conference as it develops. To do that, we should have, there is a site you can go to. I will put it on the screen right now. It is ICMI2019.subscribemenow.com. I had put a link in the low bar to that. So if you just want to go there, and all you got to do is give us your name and your email to join the mailing list. And then you'll get updates on the ICMI 2019 as we sort of like march towards that day. So definitely be a part of that action, because it's going to be a good time. Okay, so I have put out all of the things that I'm supposed to say about this. Now we're going to go ahead and get into the stories. So first things first, we got to talk about Jussie Smollett, because it went from a nothing, and now it's like the only thing people are talking about. And I guess we should probably give it the Badger treatment. So Mike J, if you could tell us about Jussie Smollett.
Oh, I can, and I will. So it's been just over 20 days since actor Jussie Smollett claims he was attacked in a racially motivated hate crime. The Empire actor claims that while outside his Chicago apartment in sub-zero temperatures during that polar vortex, he was attacked by two white men wearing ski masks. The two men made racial and homophobic remarks toward him before warning him that this is MAGA country. and attacking him. Despite the individuals being able to tie a noose around his neck and pouring an unknown liquid thought to be bleach on him, Smollett was able to fight them off, only sustaining minor injuries. Smollett's story quickly found supporters, especially among progressive politicians such as Kamala Harris and Cory Booker. Progressive celebrities like Shonda Rhimes, Viola Davis, and Ellen Page were also quick to voice their outrage and support. Smollett was also quick to shame his doubters or anyone merely skeptical of his story by stating, quote, "I have to acknowledge the lies and the hate. It feels like if I had said it was a Muslim or a Mexican or someone black, I feel like the doubters would have supported me much more, a lot more, and that says a lot about the place we are in our country right now." End quote. Unfortunately for Smollett, it seems like his story is crumbling. Brothers Abel and Ola Osundario were arrested and ID'd as the two men on surveillance who attacked Smollett. Following the arrest, the two Nigerian bodybuilders and friends of Smollett claimed that he paid them to stage the attack on him. Evidence recovered from the brothers' apartments, such as receipt of the clothesline, which was used as a noose, seems to confirm their story. The two brothers have since begun fully cooperating with police. Despite the mounting evidence against his version of events, Smollett strongly denies orchestrating the attack on himself. He has since sought legal counsel, and attorneys speaking for him state that he will not be giving further comment to police.
He does not know the
You
way.
do not know the way. Do you know the way?
Well, one thing's for sure. Whatever his acting skills are, this definitely makes it crystal clear that he is not a good writer. He should stick to the acting. The screenplay just didn't go off so well.
Yeah.
That's why you keep your actors as actors and your writers as writers.
Yeah, unless you have somebody extraordinary who actually can do both. Yeah, you end up with really really bad fiction.
And like if he had just toned it down a little bit, or maybe not insisted so strongly on certain parts.
Or stereotyping so bad. This is
Yeah.
MAGA country. Yeah, who has ever said that?
No one in history ever until he did.
Yeah.
Apart from anything else, it's not true. It's fucking Chicago.
Yeah, really.
No.
Yeah, Chicago
perhaps-
is definitely not MAGA country.
Perhaps the most unbelievable element of this entire story was, to quote Matt Christensen, if you kick a guy's ass, you take his Subway sandwich.
Yeah,
He
right.
still had his sandwich with him when the police showed up. I
And
don't
his
care if
phone.
you're gonna eat it. Yeah. But seriously, you take the guy's sandwich. You earned it. Come on now.
I'm not that much of a fan of Subway sandwiches.
Well,
So.
I presume it's like
Not even if you want to eat it. Just you take it from him to deny him of it.
I presume it's like a British guy with his pint. Like no amount of abuse can separate a British man from his pint. No amount of terrorism can separate a British man from his perfectly unspilled pint. I presume it's like that with Americans and sandwiches.
Definitely with sandwiches, but Subways, they're not. Those aren't sandwiches. Those barely
Like-
qualify as food.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
They used to be good.
Yeah, back when they were new. Yeah.
Yeah, they were all right.
And the thing about this that really that I find really amazing is, firstly, there were people who were more upset that it turned out to be a hoax because they thought that it would give the MAGA people, as the way they put it, ammunition against them. So basically they're concerned, they wish a real hate crime had taken place because they didn't want to look bad because the guy lied, for one. The other thing is that there's just so many things wrong with this, right? Like, obviously, the This Is MAGA Country story, I don't know if you guys have noticed this trend, okay? But there have been, in my mind, more hate crime hoaxes than hate crimes. Like seriously.
There have been.
Has there
this
been-
isn't in your mind.
I don't
Has there
even. I don't
been
even.
a news story of an actual hate crime in the last few years that
No.
didn't
There has
turn out?
been.
Because I can't remember.
There has been one. It was this really bizarre one. This guy like left this threatening note at a church, and it was like done in the whole like movie ransom note thing where he cut things out of a magazine and put it on. And it had like a picture of Trump in a KKK hood, and it's like, this guy's gonna kill you guys and stuff
Did
like
they
that.
ever find
They
out who
did.
did
They
it?
caught the guy, and it was like this mentally retarded white guy. Like this guy, I think, had an IQ of like maybe 60.
So there was actually something.
His IQ is lower than the
unusual
temperature in my
about him.
apartment.
Yeah, so there
Yeah.
was actually something unusual about him and wrong, not just, that he was
like, hey,
associated with a particular group.
It happened. But yeah, a lot of these have been turning out to be fake. There was the one that was what was it? This couple like spray painted a bunch of like backwards swastikas on their car.
Yeah.
And it was so funny. Like during the interview, you could see the can of spray paint
In
on
the
their
back.
counter, and it's the same color. And like you had the family members tweeting like, "We gonna be rich."
Oh, good grief.
Oh my
It's
god.
ironic that he says, if I had said it was a Muslim or a Mexican or someone black, I feel like the doubters would have supported me much more, which is a weird noun to use, because then the doubters wouldn't be the doubters anymore, and the people who believed you would be the doubters instead. But he's sort of
Yeah.
he's failing to see it that way around.
Yeah.
It's like he knows that if he had said it was a Muslim or a Mexican or someone black, it would definitely not be a news story. In fact, it would be buried.
There
I wonder how many opposite sort of hoaxes happen.
yeah.
How many times someone really does get fucked up by someone black or Mexican, and then
Well,
is
and then the
prosecuted for
people that
hate
support
speech
him
if they
don't
report
care.
that crime. I don't know.
I'm just gonna put out an unpopular opinion. I don't like the idea of a hate crime as a classification of crime at all. And I think that there's just, to me, I know that this is not the way the country treats it, and I know this is not the way most people treat it, but to me, there's just crime. And hate crime, it's essentially trying to make a crime more severe based on the motive or intent of the person committing it, and I don't think that should necessarily make a crime worse or better. It's just a crime either way. So that's my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't like
No,
the
I
idea
agree with you.
of hate crime at all. And I mean, I'm and here's one of the other things about it too. The existence of the let's say descriptor hate for crimes, by saying something is a worse crime if it's considered a hate crime. The problem with that is it will never be applied equally. So if some obvious examples is if black men kill a bunch of white people, there was a black man who shot up a white church not that long ago, right? And he did it supposedly because they were white. There are many people who won't call that a hate crime because racism is power plus prejudice, right? And in that case, even though, the guy with the gun in the room technically has more power, institutionally speaking, he doesn't. There's problems with that. But it's not just that. It's not just about race. I look at it in terms of gender too, because most of the time, people who are victims of any crime are going to be men. And so if there's any group that one could theoretically lay claim that could be victims of hate crimes on a scale that far outreaches any other group, it's the male group. But they will never, ever, ever see it that way. So, and I wouldn't want it that way either, to be clear. Like when they were talking about making misandry a hate crime in the UK, I disagree with that idea on its face. I don't like the idea of hate crimes. But
in principle and in practice.
Yeah, in principle and in practice. Exactly.
Not a good idea,
Yeah. So, but like, on top of that, what I'm saying is that even if we did say, well, we're going to start looking at hate crimes across lines of race, religion, nationality, ethnicity, and gender, it will not actually end up being applied that way either. Because again, in the UK, they're saying they're going to make misandry a hate crime, but I can guarantee you there won't be a lot of things that qualify as misandry compared to what would qualify as misogyny. And when you do it along racial lines and ethnic lines and religious lines, there will not it could be because it was a man and not because it was a Muslim man, or it could be because it was a man and not because it was a trans woman or whatever, right? And I think that when you start talking about hate crimes, you start erasing making it to where it's harder for people to see that the constant that runs throughout all of that are male victims more than anything. And I'm not, again, to be sure, to be clear, I'm not saying that we should recognize that there is such a thing as hate crimes against men. I just don't like the descriptor in general. I think that we should just treat crimes as crimes, and that's it. So that's the other thing I wanted to say about this case. So there were people that were hoping it was real because they didn't want to look bad. And then I don't like the idea, because there were politicians, there was the last thing I want to say. There was Booker, I think a lot of Congress people were trying to push this anti-lynching bill that basically makes lynching a hate crime. No one's been lynched for like 50 years or something in the US. It's been a really long time since we've actually had a lynching on file. But the reason why they want to put it in there, I think, is the reason why they want to add all kinds of extra laws. They want to broaden the definitions of things so that they can essentially imprison whoever they want to under these broadened definitions. That's why the idea of a hate crime is disgusting to me, because I know that the ultimate purpose is to just put more men in jail. And so and under whatever reasons they want to, and for longer periods of time than a normal crime would. So anyway, that's it. That's what I wanted to say about this case. That's my take.
The thing about hate crimes that's really dumb is they act like this is going to prevent hate, and it doesn't. It actually just makes people more resentful, especially in terms of you have one group that's protected but another group that's not. How do you build resentment more than to say it's worse for them to do bad, or for you to do bad things to them, than it is for them to do bad things to you? And we're going to say that the things you do are bad because of the color of their skin, but not the other way around, and so on. So it's almost counterproductive in terms of actually dealing with differences in society. And what we used to have in terms of criminal designation is your intent mattered in terms of what you intended to do to the person and the consequences you intended to force the person to face, or the adversity you intended to inflict on the person. Not why so much you did it, not because you were, why you were angry or whatever. The only time your reason mattered is if it was something that was so compelling that it could be a mitigating circumstance. A heat of the moment snap could excuse actions you would not have taken if you had time to think about it. And at the other end of it, if you had malice aforethought, that indicates that you intended to deliberately cause harm for the sake of causing harm, rather than snap reaction. But this idea that you do it because of the color of someone's skin or someone's religion or someone's sex, that makes it a worse crime, it's really a departure from that, because it takes away from the uh, the intention of the crime, what you intended to do to the person. It takes away from the determinations that make the difference between voluntary and involuntary actions, or negligent actions versus deliberate actions. It's not more deliberate because you didn't like the person, right? It's still deliberate, even if you didn't have anything personal against the person. If you knowingly and willfully and with planning ahead of time take a gun and shoot somebody, that's just as violent if you do it because you want their wallet as it is if you do it because they're black or Muslim or a woman or a man or they have pink hair. So it's there isn't really any sense behind hate crime laws other than to make people feel like they're doing something about racism, and people can feel like they're better people if they support this because they're condemning something bad. Everybody always feels good when they condemn something bad, even if their condemnation doesn't achieve anything positive. And that's basically what's going on here. There is no point to hate crime laws at all, other than to make people feel better.
Yeah, it's basically virtue signaling wrapped up in criminal prosecution. I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
It's it's helpful to have an idea of mens rea. It's helpful to sort of establish the difference between a crime of passion in the heat of the moment and a premeditated crime. It's the difference between swinging your fists in a bar fight and going out to buy a canister of gasoline and coming back to apply it to your mark. In the case of serious crimes like murder, we already have a system there, first degree and second degree, that makes the differentiation without race or gender as a necessary factor anywhere. And imagine if someone wanted to change the law so that the victim or so-called victim is themselves the arbitrator of first or second degree for any crime. I mean, this is what a jury is for, right?
Yes. Yes, exactly. To determine that, right, the severity of it, right? And the intent is already taken into account, whether it's premeditated, like you said, whether it's spur of the moment, whether it's accidental. We already have this. So like the I think the hate descriptor, it's only there. I think it's there purely for political reasons. I think that's what it is. It's there for political reasons. It's there to, yes, like Hannah said, it's there to make people feel better. And if anything, what happened here doesn't prove the thing that so many people who have pulled off these fake hoax hate crimes, it doesn't prove the thing that they want it to prove. It proves the opposite of that. It proves that this is probably one of the most tolerant countries in the world, in that we leapt to this guy's support. Most people did when they heard about it. And it's hard to say whether they did so because they felt compassion for the victim or it validated hatred for the offenders, these imaginary offenders that he created. But I think that the reason why people have strong feelings against MAGA hat wearing types is because of the narrative that the mainstream media has created, which is that they are anti-equality and racist and all these other things. So the fact that they're so disliked by people who buy into the mainstream narrative only supports the idea that we aren't that country. Because there are people who will, like, without even doing research to figure out what the truth is, will just say, well, I'm against that. Those are bad things. I don't like bad things. And I think bad things are bad and nobody should like bad things. And it only, I think, serves to support that. And when the truth came out, then most people breathed a sigh of relief that nothing really bad had happened. And they were really angry at Smollett, except for his diehard supporters, for lying about it. Because I think that people in general, they don't accept that. So
it is totally the second thing that you mentioned. The people were so quick to jump on this because, oh, look, we get another, fucking bullet in the chamber against Trump and his supporters. Like,
yeah.
Did you see Ellen Page's interview on this?
Oh, yeah, I did. I want to show you guys. I saw the Ellen Page interview because it was going around. This is just a picture. I just thought I would share it. This is not okay. I gotta say this. This has nothing to do with Ellen Page's argument. But when I saw her on the Late Show, my first thought was, what happened to you? My first thought, because
she used to be a stone cold fox. Yeah.
Here's a like when she was new, early on when Jay Leno was still doing the Tonight Show, and here she is now. Holy shit, the wall.
You just look
an American
so
boy,
gaunt and like
it's either feminism or meth. Either way.
And I mean, and she's rocking that five head.
This doesn't have anything to do with it. Yes, that's like forehead like a drive-in movie theater. I agree. She looks like she looks like Wong Fei Hung from those old kung fu movies where they had the hair that starts at the back and they have to braid it. But I'm just being a dick. I get it.
No,
but yeah,
how old is she?
I don't know. 50, I guess. But that's not important. The point 31. Is that there 31. Was a 31. Holy shit.
Oh, yeah, she better start using some
bad genetics
to help you regrow your hair.
Bad genetics. Somebody said Ellen Page for Android 18. Yeah, so anyway.
But that what she said during that interview was like she went directly to, what the cause of this is, connect the dots, Mike Pence.
Yeah, connect the dots. Yep, that's what she did. And the thing is, I mean, I think that the whole thing is that for people in Hollywood and in the mainstream media, when they heard about this, for those that didn't know the truth, because there could have been some that were in on it, or at least knew that this was going to be a thing. For those that did not know the truth and were going off of the story, this was like a blessing. Like, oh, of course, and of course they bought into it because of confirmation bias. Yes, this is absolutely what would happen in Trump's America. So we're just gonna run with it, and the Hollywood folks did the same.
They are so disconnected from reality that they cannot imagine something like this being fake.
Yeah.
So the hardest thing not to believe in is your enemies. You can deconvert from your God and your religion and even your nationality, but the belief you have in the enemies that surround you, regardless of the evidence, is something you can never quite shake, because you need to believe those enemies are out there and everywhere, or you can't justify our authoritarian fucking iron fist that you rule over them with.
So Ellen Page's picture is proof that feminism is cancer. Anyway, before, after. All right, so let's move on to the next story. But basically, those are my. Anybody have any other thoughts on the Jussie Smollett story? I understand that
did you show that one picture?
Oh yeah, that's right. There were memes, so I do have that.
The street artist is doing these,
yes.
and they're great.
So these are actually out in the streets. These aren't like photoshops or something like that, right?
As far as I know, yeah.
Yeah, so these are posters that are mysteriously surfacing in Los Angeles. A black prankster, which is where I got the title from today's show. I love this. And then there's a black Klansman. This is MAGA country.
Oh,
God. So, yeah, I mean, like, that's basically it. I will say this one last thing, okay? This hoax is probably the greatest gift that you have just given to the Trump administration, is that you tried this and it did not work out for you. This is like the best thing to happen for people that are Trump supporters and anything that Trump or his cabinet could have done. The only thing that could like fuck up 2020 at this point is if like Trump drops the ball on something really major. So thank you so much, Jussie Smollett. And thanks for proving that this country is a lot more tolerant and better than you think it is. And thank you, Nigerian guys, for being base enough to not to want to expose the truth, because it was them coming forward that did this. So men are good. Nigerian men are good.
It's the meme I've been hearing that I've been loving has been when your country is so tolerant and inclusive, you have to go find 2 Nigerians to help you fake a hate crime.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what strikes me about this is there's been a pattern, and I mean in the last year it's become more evident, but it's been this way for a while. Anytime the the progressive end of the left, the regressive progressive end, anytime they have something they want to sort of foist off on the rest of the public as a thing you have to believe, like anytime they want to impose a belief, and they can't prove it because it's not true, they come up with something like this. Anytime they want to get rid of somebody, they throw a false accusation, and then they turn around and say false accusations are rare. Anytime they want to demonize a group of people, they lie about a conflict, or they lie about someone's character. And when the evidence comes out that they lied, they double down, and then they triple down, and then they start squirming around about, well, this just goes to show, that this kind of thing is bad, and you guys are responsible for it. And the next thing is, well, we were trying to get a conversation started. So I'm waiting for that set of comments.
yeah.
Well, this was just an attempt to get a conversation started. Well, how about the conversation about how false accusations are bad? How about the conversation about how your credibility just goes out the window when you start making up shit about people in order to prove your point? How about that conversation? When can we have that conversation? Because they're making it more and more and more relevant, more present, more timely every time they throw one of these.
Yeah, agreed.
Is his name really Jussie? By the way?
Yeah,
Yes, his name is
bet.
Jussie.
I didn't know that was a name. I assumed it was.
I didn't
So
know.
different mispronunciation of Jesse.
I thought everyone was naming him Jesse, and then I realized, oh, it's like Jussie. It's like you're saying Jesse, but with like the stereotypical gay lisp.
Oh, with a South African sort of lilt, which is saying a white supremacist name and a white supremacist accent. It seems to be just doubling back on yourself.
Yeah, I had to look twice. A lot of people make the mistake of writing Jesse with an E, but it's Jussie Smollett.
Like I looked, and all of his brothers and sisters have weird names that start with J.
Oh, that's. Well, actually, you know what? Now that you say that, I wanted to say that's weird, but then when I think about the way that like we used to name people like many years ago, like you name everyone in your family names that sounded kind of similar, like the siblings would have somewhat similar names because it was an easy way to identify that they were part of the same family. I seem to recall I read that someplace.
Well, a lot of people
in Europe and stuff,
gave their kids names out of of basically characters out of the Bible or characters out of whatever holy book they followed. So you also have that.
Or previous family members that probably got their names from the Bible.
There's an awful lot of Harrys and Hermiones in the upcoming generation.
Oh, God.
Yeah, there probably will.
Oh my God.
My family has family heirloom names. Like my brother and I both, as part of our names, have family heirloom names. They're just not our first names.
Let's see. His brothers and sisters are Journey, Jazz.
Journey has some good bands, but they have a few songs.
No, it's not even spelled like that though. It's Jurnee.
Journey.
Journey, Jazz, Joquai, Jojo, and then there's just Jake.
Is that a motherfucking JoJo reference?
Michael Keller, to answer your question, obviously their parents were geography worshippers. Geography worshippers.
But then it's like you got all those names, and then there's just Jake.
Oh man, now that guy's the odd man out. Okay, so we got to read through some super chats here, and then we'll go on to the next story. Q Brother Soulstar gives us $5. It says, "Did you catch the Nana Efua Mumford Washington Post article where she admits she desperately needs the narrative to be true?" Yes, I caught that. We talked a little bit about it. There was quite a few people that were disappointed that it didn't really happen because they really wanted it to be real. Mr. Roboto gives us $2 and says, "Some crimes are definite hate crimes. Second, how's Alison? Is that what you're asking?" She's fine. She's recovering fine. I think a crime crimes can certainly exist because of hate, but I don't think that you can apply something as subjective and difficult to prove as that to actual like write that into law, because I think that is dangerous. And that's of course crimes can happen because of hate, but I don't think it should make the crime worse or better for that matter. The DCV Titan
hate crime laws. Hate crime laws specify only some hate as being specifically bad, because if you have somebody that maybe you have a coworker or somebody in your field that just constantly one-ups you in your area, and you're just constantly playing second fiddle to this person, there are people who will develop a degree of hate toward that person and resentment because that person has success and they don't. And there have been instances where somebody has committed a murder because they hated somebody for a reason like that, or because that they were, the ex-spouse that cheated or moved on after the murderer cheated and so on. And there's hatred there as well. But those things don't get called hate crimes.
Right.
It's only a hate crime if it's because of your immutable characteristics, or if they the state determines that it's because of your immutable characteristics, even if it's not.
All right. So the DCV Titan gives us $5 Canadian and says, "It's just like somebody said. This whole thing is what happens when the demand for racism overtakes the supply." Yes. Lauren literally gives us $4.99 and says, that's the hairline of a lesbian who spends a lot of time on top, if you know what I mean. Yeah, shoot, dude. She looks like an Invader Zim character. She looks like Quizboy from Venture Brothers. She looks like that cat, the evil cat from the Earthworm Jim game.
She straight up has the same look as Geddy Lee does.
Yeah, right. Geddy Lee from Rush. Holy shit. It's true.
She looks like she put on a mask and it covered up some of her hair.
I think she might be half Klingon now.
Yeah, right.
Just waiting for the ridges to form.
Oh, man.
We've all had fun, ladies and gentlemen. We've all had fun.
All right.
Hair today, gone tomorrow.
Whew. French Honey Badger gives us $5 and says the worst thing that can happen to Trump 2020 would be an economic crisis and that people blame capitalism and tax cuts for it. And it's very likely. Well, they're going to blame capitalism for everything. So, yeah, that won't matter.
Despite Trump. I'm hashtagging
Yeah, despite Trump.
We've got despite Brexit here. You'll get despite Trump on everything good that happens.
Mm-hmm. Mighty Balzac gives us $2 Australian and says, I dare you to do Laurie Penny before and after. Yeah, that sounds like it could be its own show, so maybe later. Meredith
There
Glass...
is no after with Laurie Penny. She's been a toddler since she was a toddler.
Yeah, but kind of like an evolving one, like the end of Akira. Just growing and growing, but still looks like a baby. Meredith Glassberg gives us $5 and says, Andy Go has a hate hoax list on Twitter that is growing. Yes, I am aware of that. That's what I'm saying. It's a big problem. And the worst part is that there might be actual crimes. There probably are actual crimes that are happening in the world, in the country even, that are the result of some kind of hatred that is based on something that people would qualify as a hate crime. And that usually means applied to people of a certain group, ethnicity, race, gender, whatever. But the problem is that the real ones that happen are not high profile enough to make the news. And the hoaxes are the ones that tend to get picked up by the media because they're a little bit too on the nose. And they think that means that they're naturally occurring, which is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, so that's a problem. Hokey gives us $1.99 and says, time to start selling hate. 1-800-EASY-HATE. All right, so that's the those are the super chats. Let's get on to the next story. If I think of another joke about Ellen Page's forehead, I'll probably mention it at some point. But
just keep it on the top of your head, Brian.
Yeah. Oh no. Okay.
And as soon as they come to the forefront, you can mention them.
All right. Why so many young women don't identify as feminist? From polling in the United States and United Kingdom, less than 1 in 5 young women are calling themselves feminists. This is in spite of talks of feminism all around with the hashtag #MeToo and, quote, believe the survivor moments. Many celebrities, such as Alyssa Milano and Emma Watson, have embraced the term, quote, feminist. Overall, 34% of women in the UK identify as feminist. The spread across Europe for men and women identifying as feminists ranges from 8% in Germany to 40% in Sweden. However, even though individuals don't identify as feminists, 8 in 10 said that men and women should be treated equally. Polls suggest that reasons why people don't identify as feminists comes down to class and race. Before we move on to that bit, though, I just want to make a statement about this. Well, let's look at this chart. So basically, percentage, it looks like, out of 40, up to 40, people are asked if they identify as feminist, okay? So in the UK, it shows 27%?
34, I think it said.
Yeah, oh, okay, but yeah, it does say 34% here of women. But here on this chart that I'm displaying, if you look at Great Britain at least, it says 27. So I wonder if that's like if that's because it's not including the other countries and maybe the total will be 34. But because it does say 27 here, but the article says 34. But then the article describes it as the UK, whereas this chart just says Great Britain. So could that be
The article
reason?
was written by a feminist, and feminists can't do math. Maybe.
Yeah, they don't know how to just copy the numbers and.
There.
They were accounting for several women who said they weren't feminists, but really we understand their consent better than they do. So
there we go.
Well, the one thing I wanted to say about this, though, is despite the fact that the BBC article is lamenting the idea that there aren't enough that women are identifying as feminists, because they do try to tell you, but even though the definition is just this, the thing is, though, guys, because I've heard, and I've said this before, there have been people that will go and they'll say, feminism is dead, y'all, because nobody wants to identify with the term. But the problem with that is, that doesn't really matter much. People are like, the fact that people don't identify as feminists doesn't really matter much. What matters is, do they believe in feminist ideas? Do they believe the wage gap is real? Do they believe that the primary victims of domestic violence are women to such a degree that men don't need shelters? Do they believe in something akin to, even if they don't call it, rape culture? Do they believe in these ideas? Do they believe in the patriarchy? Do they believe women have been oppressed throughout history? Do they believe that, women had to fight to get the vote? Do they believe the second wave feminism was good? And I think that if you ask these people those questions, instead of simply saying, do you identify as a feminist, these numbers are going to be a lot higher. And because of that,
from the numbers, you would get the idea that in Sweden they hate their own native males, but in Germany not so much. Whereas in practice, you can tell both nations have a healthy dislike for their own native males.
Yeah, pretty much. So I just want to clear that up. I think that of course, because BBC, well, not the BBC, but like feminists in general are obsessed with the idea that you take on the label. They don't even care if you agree with every single talking point. They care, do you call yourself a feminist?
They need useful idiots.
Yeah.
The label is important to them. It's important to them that the grassroots use the label, because then they can go to people in positions of responsibility and say, look, we have a lot of pull with society. This many women identify as feminists. You have to listen to us, pass this law, or change this policy in your business, and so on. And there's a lot of executives that like one of my joke theories always was that every corporation keeps a secret room full of chimpanzees on acid, and they give them paper and crayons, and whatever they draw becomes policy. And this is because I've worked at the bottom rung of a lot of different corporations, and there is a blatant and obvious disconnect between like the ivory tower executives and the rest of the real world. They have no idea what goes on in the real world. Mm-hmm. So it's not that hard to snow those guys if you're a lobbyist and you're trying to convince them that we speak for women and this is what women want. But if they see news trends, saying, well, only 12% of women identify as feminists, then when they get feminists coming in there, that they get told basically, no, you're not really that big of a deal. You're not important. We don't have to listen to you. We see these other trends, and we're not going to do what you ask. And that's basically why they need people to have the to have the label. But the other end of this, you have a lot of women. They really aren't necessarily feminists. They really don't necessarily believe in the wage gap. They don't like the idea of false allegations. They don't want to see due process broken down in women's names. And there's plenty of them out there that are willing to acknowledge that domestic violence is domestic violence, whether it happens to a man or a woman, whether it's perpetrated by a man or a woman. Plenty of people were outraged that Jodi Arias tried to claim domestic violence as her excuse for stabbing her boyfriend 27 times after shooting him and slashing his throat. No, you were violent, but at the same time, a lot of these same women will get offended over things that are little. Like I talked to one who, talked about, she's supportive of men, she's supportive of due process. She recognizes that men can be victims of violence and women can be perpetrators of violence and all of that. But she just absolutely wigged out over the use of the word whore to describe a form of prostitution. And it did not. She didn't think that it was as big of a deal to use creep shaming against men as it is to use whore shaming against women or slut shaming against women. Because apparently she didn't quite grasp the threat that men are under when they have the finger pointed at them and get called creep versus how women are treated when they're not engaging in overt prostitution and they get some jerk calls them a slut or some other chick calls them a slut, which is much more often. And she could not grasp the significance. She couldn't grasp the difference, and she couldn't figure out that if she was so offended over that it was that much bigger to talk about the fact that guys get beat up or arrested just for having some chick point at them and say this guy's creeping on me. And that disconnect, like there's still a solipsistic, it's not just gynocentrism, it is a personal thing with a lot of women. Not just the female experience, but my female experience is bigger than the male experience. And I see that with a lot of gals. And I've watched a lot of gals get really offended if their sensibilities are not coddled in the course of discussion of men's issues. And I think that's probably out of everything. Gynocentrism is a threat to discussion of men's issues, but that is a bigger threat because it's harder to put your finger on and it's harder to challenge. So I guess that's my take on it. Not a lot of women buy into the feminist victim identity cult, but they still have that attachment to the privilege of having their
Yeah.
sensibilities coddled.
Yeah.
Men don't have life experience. You have this is my life experience as a woman, and you have to accept it.
Yeah, so Black Knight Fool in comments said in addition that this is the intention of the person who's writing the article is to essentially say, despite the fact that you don't identify as feminist, you are feminist because you do agree with our core ideas. And I agree with that. And I was gonna bring that up, is that is whenever this comes up, and this happens, HuffPo has done it and lots of other articles have done it, where they say, well, despite the fact that these people still agree with most of our talking points, they refuse to call themselves feminists. Well, guess what? You are one, because you agree with, the equality of the sexes or whatever. And I get that that's the purpose, is essentially to try to convince people, essentially gaslight the audience into believing something that they don't, that they would normally, that they don't necessarily agree with on its face, but in a lot of ways they're right in that they do agree with enough that, if you had to have a label, they're just trying to sell it. So yeah, that is really happening. Sure. And I know that they want to bolster their numbers.
And then you ask them if there's any men's rights for which they advocate, and they list off the men's rights they can think of that they advocate for. And then you ask, are you a men's rights advocate? No, of course not. Those people are scum. Bye-bye principles. Yeah, you thought we had some, didn't you? No, sir.
It's almost as if the feminists have like appropriated the idea of equality.
Yeah, almost. Well, they want to own the conversation around gender equality. That's for certain. All right, so moving on, there's more charts. Polls suggest that reasons why people don't identify as feminists comes down to class and race. So let's further complicate things, shall we? 1 in 3 people working in managerial, administrative, and occupations classed as ABC1 call themselves feminists. Meanwhile, for those who fall into grade C, C2DE, which includes manual workers, state pensioners, casual workers, and the unemployed.
So
Only
they're droids. I thought it sounded like the name of a droid.
Yeah. Only 1 in 5 identify themselves as feminists. Despite this, those in lower income brackets, so 8 and 10, still support equal rights between men and women. So basically what they're saying is people at the lower rungs of society that have to work harder to survive tend to not identify as feminist.
Well, there's another factor there, though. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So you go into business administration, or let's say you go into human resources, or any of those areas where you're going to rise up in the ranks. If you go into psychology, so you're going to end up with a practice, or you're going to be part of a practice. If you go into any area of medicine, any area where you have to have higher education, guess what you're going to get indoctrinated with at university? There is not a professional area that does not have some course that you have to take that is that's not influenced, or that's influenced by interdisciplinary studies. There's no area of study from which it is absent anymore, other than maybe the hard sciences. And they're trying to penetrate that. They're trying pretty hard to penetrate that without the consent of the people involved. So you have people come out of college claiming to identify as feminists because they have gone through school and they have been taught that that's what they are, if they believe in equality. And a lot of them are getting maybe just enough indoctrination to like, maybe they don't know anything else about gender politics besides what they got in their class. And so maybe they're getting just enough indoctrination that they see feminism based on the history that feminists allow to be taught at university, which is the idea that men could vote, all men could vote, and no women could. And the idea that women were always paid less than men, that women couldn't work without a man's position or permission, and all of that stuff. None of that is really true. There were conditions that women faced that those are an accurate description for the conditions that some women faced. Many women faced a lot of those conditions, but none of it is solid truth. And if people don't know any better, they're going to call themselves feminists, especially if they've had it pushed on them by somebody that they've paid to be more knowledgeable than they are. And the other end of it is, you get up in those professional areas, there's social pressure and professional pressure to conform to a belief system. You're not going to move up in the company if you don't. Oh yeah, of course I'm a feminist. Everybody's a feminist. Why would I not be a feminist? That's going to be a problem. That's going to lead to people identifying as feminist, at least outwardly, and possibly even on the inside, simply because they're afraid if they don't, they're not going to be accepted in their workplace. But you don't have that kind of pressure when you're a grunt in a gas station, or when you're just on the line in a factory. Nobody there cares if you're a feminist. They care if you get your job done. And you're not in charge of other people. You're not managing people. You're not dealing with interpersonal conflict. You're not dealing with any issues that would bring your gender politics out. So there is no motivation, and there's no educational push to become a feminist. So of course there's going to be a gap.
It's just like the Pope. It's in the Pope's interest that as many people as possible identify as Catholic.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what you do. You can rape and pillage all day and just say 12 Hail Marys, Bob's your uncle. As long as you identify as a Catholic, you have to do what I say because I'm the fucking Pope, and that's how that works.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. With regards to race, 12% of Hispanic women, 21% of African American women, 23% of Asian women, and 26% of Caucasian women identify as a feminist. 3 out of 4 women say that the feminist movement has, quote, done either a lot or some to improve the lives of white women, end quote. Meanwhile, only 6 out of 10 say that feminist has done as much for non-white women. So,
well, they're kind of right.
Yeah.
Although they're kind of right and they're kind of wrong, because coddling someone in the long run handicaps them. So feminism has done a great job of making white women feel privileged without feeling like they have to have guilt over feeling privileged until now. And of course, the third wave is guilt tripping white women over what the previous generations, quote, did for white women, end quote, the ways in which they messed white women up. And now they're trying to inflict it on other women of other ethnic backgrounds. I hope they reject it. I hope it doesn't spread. I hope instead they turn around and say, "You dumb shits, get out of that stupid cult," and more white women abandon it.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see. I mean, it was just a study. I think it was weird because I thought when I first read this BBC article, I thought, is this an old article? Because I saw it was showing up, and I swear I've seen those many times before where they say, not a lot of people are identifying as feminists, and it's really puzzling because, I mean, they believe all the things we believe. And sure enough, it was a brand new one. And I think that what is happening is that feminists in journalism and in the media, and they're checking in, they're taking the pulse of their movement to see if it's still popular, or if it's losing popularity or whatever. And when it turns out that it's not as popular as it should be, which of course it will always be until like the whole world is 100% feminist, they're just going to keep doing this, where they basically reiterate the same old tired slogans and try to convince people that what they're doing, even if they deny it, is the thing. It's like when people tell you that you may not be religious, but you're behaving in accordance to religion, so you are religious, for example. So instead of just leaving people alone, but whatever. Does anybody have any other final thoughts on this story before we move on? Okay, so I'm going to read the super chats, and then we'll go into Gawker. By the way, Ellen Page looks like the Crypt Keeper now. I think she's going to climb out of a circle.
Should we just forge ahead?
Oh. Okay. Let's see.
I'd say my noggin is a jogging, but that would take at least 1,000 newtons of force.
Oh man. All right, we got $2 from somebody and the message was redacted. So whoever you are, thank you. And I'm sorry that your message didn't go through. And then Q Brother Soulstar gives us $2 and says, "The Last of Us 2, Ellen Page's hairline." Whoa, that's spicy. But yeah, I'm with that. So, all right, let us move on to the next story. We're going to be talking about Gawker, or basically Gizmodo, more accurately. So, Mike J, if you could.
Certainly, Brian. So the Gizmodo Media Group, a larger part of the former Gawker Media Group, hasn't been doing so hot after its buyout by the Spanish media giant known as Univision. Gawker, as many will remember, was leg dropped into oblivion by Hulk Hogan following a $140 million lawsuit after the company leaked a sex tape. Despite the change in ownership, the downward spiral continues, but not just for them. Univision has reported that all of their English-language digital businesses, which include satire website The Onion, have lost over $32 million as of the last quarter of 2018. Unfazed by this loss, Univision still believes in the brand and wishes to find a buyer, stating, quote, "Our English-language digital brands are long-standing, recognized sources of news and information."
Wait, what are they? What are they talking about? Are they talking about? Are they actually talking about their companies?
Their English language brands, which
well, you know what? I forgive Univision. English is probably not their first language, so this might not be translated correctly from what they're actually trying to say.
Or they might just not know.
Yeah, they're not watching their own content, maybe.
Yeah, they might just not know.
So, I'll start from the top. Our English language digital brands are long-standing, recognized sources of news, information, and entertainment in the verticals, and we believe that they can thrive as part of a company whose better focus aligns with theirs. Translation: please get these cancer brands off of us. We will sell them for $12. Take them. It's been reported that Great Hill Partners, a private equity firm, is in private talks with Univision to acquire Gizmodo Media Group. However, Univision has not confirmed or denied this so far.
Okay. Just real quick about The Onion. They've been trashed for a little while, and I used to love The Onion.
Oh yeah,
they've been trashed. They've become partisan hacks, even with a satire site. And I find the Babylon Bee to be much funnier. And I regret to say it, but it's true. The Babylon Bee is
reality overtook
better.
The Onion several years ago. We all
Then they started softballing everyone on the left. Like there was this horrible piece about Clinton, and it was like first female president told to be more, or first female presidential candidate told to be more inspiring.
Oh,
like that's not that biting satire that I knew and loved The Onion for. That's just a thinly veiled like puff piece set up and disguised as satire.
Well, you got to try and hit from both directions, I guess. You got to try and satirize the left and the right sometimes, and sometimes to satirize the right that means propping up the left. I don't know. They're trying. Maybe.
Does it?
No.
I don't know that it necessarily means propping up the left, but the thing is, you got to satirize both sides, and both sides give you plenty of material. Because you have one side that's really uptight about money, and the other side's really uptight about sex. So it's not that hard.
Yeah, they used to be good at it, because I remember I used to read The Onion at my job because we get a bunch of issues, because they were free. And I remember it was right before Obama's election. It was leading up to it. And they did this one funny article that showed like two alternate universes where like the left's greatest fears and the right's greatest fears came to pass for both candidates, right? So like the McCain future timeline and the Obama timeline. And they were funny. They were both funny because they were actually fair in how they made fun of the expectations of the parties about the opposite party winning. So like, the left thought that if McCain won, gays would be, sent to camps, and we'd go to war with everybody, and and all that. And then like in the Obama future, it was like everyone, everyone's on drugs, and they're all just like, and like it just all this apocalypse on both sides. And it was really funny because it was taking some truth and exaggerating it. But that was a while ago. I was like reading The Onion for years, but I noticed that ever since it's gone online, maybe they got bought by Univision. Maybe they started by like as a small company by themselves.
They did.
I think they were printed here in Chicago.
They were bought by Univision, and they went ahead and they bought the rest of the stake in them recently, because they were considering selling them off, and they wanted to not just sell part of it off, they wanted to sell the whole thing. And yeah, it turns out they're not doing so hot anymore.
Yeah, I don't know when the worm turned, as it were, but I used to like The Onion, and now I still see their articles, and some of them are okay, but like it's not consistent. Like a lot of them are they're just not. It's not even that they're being partisan hacks. It's that they're just not as funny. And I think the Babylon Bee, for me, tends to be a lot better about being funny. Also, that one, there was another fake news site that's specifically about military stuff that's also really funny. So there's more of these things popping up that are pretty good. So I don't know. The Onion does have more competition now, whereas before it was like the only thing that was like that. So there's that.
I mean, that's just a greater thing that's happened to comedy in the whole in the past like 4 or 5 years. Especially ever since Trump got elected, it's all become either the most banal milquetoast, super safe humor, or you can be mean and nasty and edgy, but as long as the punchline is Orange Man bad, or Orange Man supporters bad.
You can be edgy and mean as long as you're doing it in the right direction. That's how it is now, anyway. But that's just The Onion. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on any of the other stuff with this story. I'm surprised Gizmodo's still a thing myself. But yeah, I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts on this story. But yeah, goodbye, Gizmodo, is all I'm saying.
I'm surprised anyone wants to buy it. And why did nobody want to buy Alex Jones as a result of him being destroyed by the very people who are now falling on their own fucking sword? It's kind of further proof that the likes of Gorka sort of have the narrative on their side, despite being shit at everything. They're considered a safe, risk-free, good PR thing to have to your name. So they've managed to find some poor cunt to buy it. Oh dear.
Well, there's also some of this was predicted when the blogging phenomenon sort of exploded, because there's a lot of free news out there. And there's a lot of free advice out there. There's a lot of free information. And people do not necessarily differentiate all that dramatically between news sites that are establishment news sites and news sites that are like their cousin Jesse's blog. And so you have this situation where people will read things if they're free, and they won't read things if they're behind a paywall. They'll ad block anything that is free but has a lot of ads on it, and so it becomes a lot less profitable. Just like it was predicted, and it's sort of come true pretty badly for a lot of smaller publications, that internet media would sort of tank print media, especially newspapers. And that's true. There's been a lot of newspapers that have had serious financial problems or have just gone under completely because their circulation's down, because who's going to buy a newspaper when you can get all your news on the internet? You could say, just as the idea of video killing the radio star was proposed when MTV started to hit the market, it actually happened with print media, where the internet, where Drudge Report maybe killed the print media star. And that's probably part of what's going on here. What we'll see is the sources that are the strongest sources, the sources whose administrators figure out creative ways to make news presentation interesting to the public and profitable at the same time, they're the ones that are going to survive. And the ones that try to use narrative and authority, the idea of being establishment media and stuff like that, to push for consumer loyalty, they're going to fall like dominoes, because that's just not going to work on people.
Yeah, precisely. Also, well, I have a super chat here. Some super chats I want to read out before I forgot. So, a French Honey Badger says Alex Jones is not for sale. So that's the reason why they haven't bought him. He's not for sale, guys.
Is it more?
Gosh darn it! I was
guy who
just gonna go to the grocery store after the show and get some Alex Jones. Now I know I'm not gonna be able to get any supply. This sucks.
Is it more?
They're psychic vampires stealing the energy from the kids.
Can I interest you in some bone broth? Super male vitality.
I have a good supply of that at.
Hello? Do you guys drop? Oh
yeah. No, I'm here.
No.
I'm here.
Oh, here, and I thought I killed the room with that one.
Oh, yeah, you dropped right
Y'all
at the
probably
end.
didn't even hear me. I
didn't
said I
catch
have a
it.
good supply of that at home.
Oh, yeesh. Mr. Roboto gives us $2 and says, Hannah, how will you combat negative message to son?
Could you clarify what you're asking me? Because I'm not quite sure what.
I'm just
Perform
reading what it
positive
says.
rain dance for moon.
How can you combat negative message to son? I'm not exactly sure what you're asking me there. I don't know if you're talking about advertisements.
Sometimes use word are difficult.
Yeah. Add some more words to that, please, so I know what you're asking me. I'm confused.
Be on the lookout for the response.
Thank you.
But yes, sayonara assholes at Gizmodo. You will not be missed. So we're gonna move on to the next story.
Okay, Mr. Roboto says negative messages in society. Well, the same way that you do for your daughters. You teach your kids to form their self-image based on their experiences, their efforts, and to basically decide what they're going to be and who they're going to be, and then live up to it, and to know it and know who they are. And what negative messages come out in society, those it'll still suck to hear them, but it'll roll off their back because they know it's not true about them. And it's the same thing my parents taught me when I was a little kid, dealing with name calling and shit. You know, that if somebody calls you something that you are not, I mean, it's not necessarily worth uh, falling apart over, because you know it's not true. And no matter what they say, they can't actually make you the thing that they've said about you. They can't make it true. So what all you really have to do is just fight to make sure that they can't make it affect you. And if they call you something and it is true, then it's time for self-examination. And if you're okay with being the thing they called you, like, yeah, so what? So I am. I'm an asshole. Fuck you. And if you're not okay with it, then you need to figure out what you want to change. But there's no point in getting all bent out of shape over it, and there's no point in being manipulated easily by negative messages in society, or positive messages for that matter, or messages that sound positive at least. Like they tell girls, you can do anything. Well, no, you can't. There are many, many things that many, many people can do, but everybody can't do everything. Everybody can't do anything. Everybody has their limits, and everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. And you teach your kids to build on their strengths and to do everything they can to shore up, strengthen their weak spots. That's what you teach them, not you can do anything. So yeah, you just have to be realistic and teach your kids to be realistic and responsible and accountable. And messages from society won't mean shit.
Well said. And as long as you have that positive involvement from family members, the other stuff I don't think really stands a chance. And I think that's the point of separating families, but I digress. So let's move on to the next story. We're going to be talking about Terry Crews, who had some choice words and really interesting ones about masculinity. So Terry Crews on changing the narrative. Recently, Terry Crews attended at the 2019 Makers Conference to give a speech about toxic masculinity. He's behind the times, guys. He should really get with the program. It's now called restrictive masculinity. But whatever. Toxic masculinity it is, but I think it'll catch on. He related overcoming the cult-like disease of toxic masculinity, yes, he called it a cult, to his own deprogramming introspection after his wife left him. In the speech, he says that toxic masculinity is maintaining the image, or an image, that has nothing propping it up. Yahoo News followed up with an interview where Crews explains that he has a lot of men who are very, very angry because he's changing the narrative. So here's some quotes from Terry Crews. When you're talking about toxic masculinity, I was raised in it. I watched my mother getting punched in the face and beaten and intimidated nonstop. I was a part of it because I thought, if you can't beat them, join them. I believed that I was more valuable than the women in my life because everything in my life told me that.
Getting punched in the face and beaten and intimidated nonstop. That really had to make it tough to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, really. Or, maybe they have a big bathroom. So there's room with more
bathroom
more
breaks, like, I'll be right back, guys. You can stop hitting me now so I can go in this little room here.
Please. All right, so he continues.
Well,
Cruz.
he says because everything in my life told me that. Well, what would it look like in a society where men are seen as less valuable than women? I imagine there'd be lots of single mother children, and they would grow up thinking much the same thing as you. Even though there's no males in their lives, they would still think of males as more valuable as women. Somehow.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Cruz.
something's askew here. I don't know what.
Yeah, a bit. Well, I don't think we have his whole story, so there is that as well. And he also seems to be defending his mother a lot in this, but anyway. Cruz says toxic masculinity centers around an image of strength. The rules of the toxic gang is literally the bench press. It's ridiculous, he says. It's like determining whoever gets to run everything. You bench press the most, you get to run the world. And it was like you weren't a man until you slept with at least 10 women, used them, abused them, and throw them away.
Funny how it's not the red states that end up with governors like Arnold Schwarzenegger. People who got where they are just by lifting things.
That's funny. I didn't get that memo. I must have missed that when I was turned 14 about the whole 10 women thing.
Yeah,
It always seems like
A lot of this sounds like very specifically Terry Crews related problems, not problems that
actually
all men can relate to.
this seems like a common narrative among feminist men and men on the quote progressive left. Like I don't very often hear libertarian liberal men say things like this at all. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard a guy that I knew was more of a libertarian liberal type than an authoritarian progressive type say anything like this. But feminist men say stuff like this all the time. And guess which ideology seems to have the most bizarre allegations of this kind of behavior coming out of it?
You're
That
doing a
one.
really big think there, Hannah.
You know, it might be that because they're getting taught this shit by feminist women, that this is what other men think is true. This is the way other men live, and they grow up thinking this is normal male behavior. That they end up in a situation where either they are defenseless against false allegations because they think, well, who's going to believe me? This is normal male behavior, or they think, well, I might as well be this because everybody says it's what I am. And they all seem to be kids who were raised in environments with single mothers and no male mentors, or the men in their environment were dysfunctional, violent, had their own issues and everything, may have been raised the same way, and so on. I wouldn't necessarily call these masculine characteristics, though, because everything that he's talking about there is mirrored in women. Women have the same kind of toxic characteristics. Not necessarily, sleep with 10 women, but having the command of the general spectrum of male sexuality around you. You're more woman than you are if nobody pays attention to you. If you're the ponytail girl, with the big glasses, hiding behind her books, going down a school hallway. It's the popular girl, the social butterfly that everybody thinks is more feminine. These are not necessarily in the least bit gendered.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with strength. What's the alternative there? Does being weak make you better? Because being strong doesn't? Is that what he's actually trying to say? Because that's really stupid.
I think that he's trying to work his feminist programming and like make that like kind of coexist with his bodybuilding. And I think that like it's funny because he's calling toxic masculinity, a cult, but he's using language that it's like the guys drank the Kool-Aid. And
yeah, he's lamenting the fact that we value hallmarks of good health. That's really
Yeah,
When
but
you
that
say-
was his
when you say
thing.
we, he says toxic masculinity centers around the image of strength. Well, women are attracted to strong men.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty sure there's something biological there. Are you going to be able to change that anytime in the next million years?
Right.
I don't think so.
Why do
So
you
you're
bel-
calling men toxic for
Mhm.
something because of something women are attracted to and they can't help being attracted to. So you're never going to be able to help men being toxic. You're just going to push on this wall forever.
He also seems to believe that women's tastes have no influence over men's actions when they are everything to do with men's actions, just about. When a man goes and pursues something, usually it's because he is trying to attract women. He's hoping that this would be the way to do it. And he removes female influence. So it's not just taking away their agency, which is normal, but he's taking away their power, their influence, their existence, and how that impacts men's behavior. So,
If you want to protect men from this so-called toxic masculinity, one of the first things you ought to do is teach them not to let their self-image be determined by women.
mm-hmm.
Or
You better
society
believe it.
in general. Or
Yeah.
anything else in it.
Okay, so he continues. I love being a man, but people have taken this thing and warped it and twisted it.
I wonder who those people are.
I wonder. What we're talking about is an abuse of power. Power! There are men who really believe if you win, I lose. No. Zero sum? No. What? Like, I think that okay. All right. I don't know where he's getting this from, but if Terry Crews grew up around other black men in black communities, he was around a lot of men who did not have fathers and essentially got their values from their mother. And so despite the fact that they were in a male body, they were behaving with, let's just be honest here, female kind of ways of approaching, dealing with the world. And specifically in the same ways that their single mothers did. And single mothers in black communities tend to be a lot more abusive to their kids, and they tend to, and of course, because there's highly likely no father around, they themselves were probably raised by a single parent, and it was most likely a mother, and they may not have known their dad. There's a pattern that goes on down. So if he's around a bunch of other dudes that have all mostly been raised by single moms, if not entirely, then he's basically around femininity. And if femininity, by the way, that's misplaced because it's inside of a man's body. So this is the reason why it doesn't work. So I'm not attacking femininity by default. I'm talking about how it manifests in a man. If you took mothers away from girls, you would get something like that too. I agree that both parents are necessary. I think that what he's talking about, it's not a masculine trait. Like, this guy does not understand masculinity, and he's calling it toxic masculinity. What he's identifying as toxic masculinity is the kind of masculinity that is manifest when a man is raised by a woman and no other men and no father figures and nothing else, right? That is what I think he's identifying, but he thinks that that's normal. And that's not normal. That's not how it should be. It's the case that it's common, but that doesn't mean it's normal.
That's the thing. He looks at his experience and goes, this must be how all men are raised. This must be how every single boy in America is raised. And I mean, I sort of understand where he's coming from. Like, he wants to do something positive about it, but he's got the wrong script. And the thing is, I hate this because
he gets the
Terry
script.
Crews seems like such a likable guy.
Well, I did like him, but the thing is, though, he is acting on the script that he was given. This isn't like he was prone to this belief system already. But before the Me Too thing happened, if you hadn't noticed, before he came forward during Me Too, he was a pretty low-profile guy that just put out gym bodybuilding videos on Facebook and stuff. Was very likable, he was always a guy that people just wanted to have around. He even defended Father's Day, or it was Father's Day, yeah, because he was on the daytime, it was either The View or The Talk, And he actually debated the women on there saying a boy needs his father. Do you remember that? That was his thing. Like, we even did a video about it. This was years ago. Then the Me Too thing happened, and now he's talking about toxic masculinity. And I remember when he was on the Daily Show with Trevor Noah, and that was when Trevor Noah brought in the toxic masculinity discussion on there, and they discussed it for a few minutes. And I think that basically he already was prone to believing it, which I do agree with to an extent, but it seems to me that he was put on a path by people claiming to be experts that fed him this bullshit, and he drank the Kool-Aid. And this is what we get.
He may be rewriting things in his own mind to suit, this is what I'm supposed to present. This is what I'm supposed to be made of now. And this, like, I noticed in the chat, Black Knight Fool saying, I play football and hung around with the same people. I was a jock. What he's saying is bullshit. And I kind of wondered about that because, like,
no, I know it's bullshit. This is not how even men who compete, don't do so for dominance. They do so to make each other stronger. I know that.
Well, and there's, like, I grew up in a mostly rural area, but my classmates all played against bigger city schools. Not like huge big city schools, but bigger city schools than us. And we were consistently around athletes from varying backgrounds, varying cultures, varying ethnic backgrounds and everything. And I didn't see any, like, I was always around the guys and I didn't see any of what he's talking about. I saw a lot of healthy competition. I saw some poor sports, but I kind of wonder if, he's been through a, I don't know if I guess I would call it a political intervention where you get the hard sell on the ideology from the people around you because of who you are and where you are and who you're associated with and everything, and you start looking at your past experiences through that filter and your mind changes them because of the things that are getting imposed on you, and it's pretty close to brainwashing, what I'm talking about. And he's talking about deprogramming, but the fact is, I think he's actually been programmed, not deprogrammed. And I think he's expecting men to be programmed, not deprogrammed.
Yep.
And the idea that
he's literally doing the reverse of what he thinks he's doing. Literally.
Well, and what feminists are doing with the toxic masculinity narrative is presenting the possibility that you can do a survival mechanism too much or under the wrong circumstances as evidence that it is always bad, right? Being strong, being stoic, being capable, being tough, being confident. These are all survival techniques. These are all survival mechanisms. And there are circumstances under which, if you don't have them, you don't do well. You don't thrive. You don't survive. You get trapped in a cycle of pain and suffering and dysfunction and inability to move forward with your life. And it is they don't leave room for that. What they do is try to teach men to be helpless, to support themselves, to be helpless, to move themselves forward and pick themselves up by their bootstraps, because there are circumstances under which you do need help. There are circumstances under which it is dysfunctional to try to be stoic. You can't tough out having your leg lopped off. You can't walk off a broken ankle. It just doesn't work that way. And you can't. There are times when life just really hurts. There are things that happen that knock you down, and you do need a helping hand to get back up. And there are things that happen that you're not going to feel better, and it's okay to not feel better. There are times when you have to grieve, and there are times when you have to be not necessarily broken, but realize that you have taken damage, because you can't heal if you don't admit that it's there. And that's not wrong to point that out. What's wrong is to act like every instance is that moment when you are just too damaged, too hurt, too wounded, whatever, to be able to pick yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah.
That's basically, they're trying to, like they say, feminize men. Women have this group thing where they got to talk about everything, and you got to have validation for everything you talk about, and you got to have support from your friends in every little thing. And like, it's one of the things that's exhausting about being female is everything has to have the approval of your girls. And I can't do that. It's one of the reasons why I have been in the past ostracized from a lot of female crowds, because I don't deal with things that way. And I noticed a lot of guys don't deal with things that way. Most guys don't deal with things that way, but they're all right. And I like, feminists cannot allow men to be okay without feminism, just like they cannot allow women to be okay without feminism. Gynocentric women cannot allow women to be okay without gynocentrism. And that's basically what's going on here. And he is peddling what's been sold to him, but I don't think he really understands what he's trying to sell the men of the world at all. And if he lives in it for very long, and I think we're going to see, he's probably going to go through some pain and suffering because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is going to wear him down.
It's also worth pointing out that he did go see a therapist after his wife left him. And if you know anything about therapists, they are operating on feminist theory. Like,
yeah, he was
most of the time.
He was in rehab for pornography addiction.
Yeah. And I think the way that those people cure problems that men have, in particular with like losing a wife, like you said, pornography addiction, it's all about, okay, how can I put the blame on him, and not even as an individual. So it's essentially like they crave a call to, to answer, like they want something to do to make the world better, to make themselves better, to help the people around them. They're looking for responsibility and meaning. But it can be easy to miss that you're being blamed for something that you shouldn't necessarily have to take responsibility for, because you really want to take responsibility for something. And I think that therapists often abuse that, especially because they have that belief about men as a group already. And I think that was probably what happened to him. And now, because he's projecting that responsibility on all men. Because remember, this shit started in Hollywood, this Me Too thing. And for the most part, it was a Hollywood problem. It was a Hollywood phenomenon. It was a product of the culture of Hollywood itself. But what did Hollywood do?
But then they realized that made that look too bad. They made it look like, oh crap, we can't tell everybody who we've been claiming these unwashed masses need to listen to us. We need to guide them. We are the philosopher kings.
Yes.
Wait, we can't let them know that we're crooked. We can't let them know that we have these problems. We got to project this on everybody and make this a global thing.
Exactly. We got to basically tell the masses that it's not just us, it's everyone. It's you. Even though you may not have done it, but you thought about it, or you might do it, or it may have happened to you, or it has happened to you, or it will happen to you. And so I think that they're expanding their sick culture out to everybody else. And I think that this is what Crews is doing too, because he's basically like, okay, Terry Crews himself, the man, likely has problems. Most people have problems, and he has his own issues that he needs to deal with. But the way he's dealing with it is essentially to make every other man, for being a man, go on this journey with him. And I don't think it's an accident. I think that was on purpose. And I think that his therapist has a lot to do with it. And I think that Hollywood also has a lot to do with it. They're treating him like a golden child. He is like the poster child of toxic masculinity and the cure to it. And he's got all the traits.
Golden child of the victim cult.
Yeah. And he's got all the traits that you need too. He's like a black guy, a bodybuilder. He was associated with masculinity. He did the Old Spice commercials. So this is perfect. He's like the perfect Manchurian candidate, if you will. And so,
There's-
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say there's a thing also with respect to Hollywood, and sort of the high-powered exec thing, and the Me Too thing. And Karen has pointed this out too, that one of the characteristics of sociopathy is that the tendency to be highly successful or seek success, and so you end up with a higher percentage of the population of showmen in Hollywood, the actors and actresses, the writers, the executives, the producers, the people that are famous for being famous, basically, and maybe a higher percentage of high-powered business execs that are going to be sociopaths or psychopaths, and I think at the same time in the attention-seeking end of the people who are famous for being famous, you're going to have more people who have the borderline types of personality disorders. So you might.
Hannah? Did
Hannah?
we lose her?
I think we lost
might
her.
get killed from the internet for saying bad things about borderlines.
Oh no.
Can you hear?
Oh yeah, you're
Yeah,
back.
we can
You're
hear you, we
back.
can hear you.
You're back. You're back.
Okay. It's funny when my when Discord tells me I'm green and doing good, you can't hear me. When it tells me I'm red, I come back. So I think it's a little behind in explaining to me what's going on here. But in any case, no, you have this greater tendency of perpetration, likelihood of perpetration, and then the other thing is everybody around people in those areas is going to more likely believe that that they did something. You have a greater amount of likelihood of miscommunications, where like that video that we saw of Weinstein with the woman that was doing the sales pitch to him, and he asked her if he could flirt, and she said yes, and for him flirting involved touching, and I don't think she expected that, and she didn't clarify afterwards, where you have one side isn't communicating and enforcing their boundaries, and the other side doesn't maybe understand boundaries as well as they think they do, and so on. But the other end of that, uh, I'm looking at I'm looking at chat at the same time, and and Pi Delta says the thing about borderline is that they claim if you do such and such, but it never works. Well, that's another aspect of it. Everybody else is always guilty when you're dealing with someone who doesn't seek to overcome the symptoms of their borderline personality disorder. Everyone else is always the bad guy, right? So you have this combination of uh, psychopathy, sociopathy, and borderline personality disorder within the community surrounding him. You have the cult of victimhood using him as their golden child. And then you have Cruz himself is probably looking for excuses for every bit of dysfunction in his life. And this is something that I've noticed with people who uh, go through any kind of addiction therapy. Every mistake they've ever made in their life suddenly becomes a result of said addiction. It's that they weren't an asshole. They may have been an asshole before they were an alcoholic, but once they've start getting therapy for alcoholism, they were only an asshole because they were an alcoholic. And I like that may be, I don't know if he was an asshole or not, because his public personality and his private personality could be dramatically different, or they could be exactly the same, or whatever. But if he had things in his life that he's not proud of, he may be looking for something to attribute them to other than his own character, and other than his own choices, and other than his own personal driving, underlying personality. And that, like, there is that. And that would go along with the porn addiction thing as well. And the last thing I want to say on this is about that. I fully expect the phenomenon of porn addiction to be like the phenomenon of attention deficit disorder. Like maybe there are instances where there is such a thing as porn addiction. Maybe there are times where, like, we've seen discussion of that at ICMI, where in the rare case it actually becomes a dysfunction. But I will bet you that it gets way overdiagnosed and way overused, as an excuse for things maybe that don't even need to be excused. And a lot of men are probably getting told they're addicted to something that isn't doing them any harm, and that they're not doing anything wrong themselves because of it, but somebody disapproves of it, so it must be an addiction. And
It's
so
like
I
little
don't know
boys
what's
are, it's like little boys are being told that video games are an
yeah.
addiction. Meanwhile, no
And
one's telling little girls that their addiction to horses is potentially dangerous.
yeah. Well, I know I can't be addicted to horses. I'm allergic to most of the things they need to live.
Or
Actually scare the
their
shit out of somebody
addiction,
to
yeah, or girls'
I
addiction
went through
to
a
like
horsebound.
or girls' addiction to social media or
Or
TikTok
makeup.
or something or makeup.
I
Yeah.
mean, like, I had when I worked at the
There are people that
pharmacy I
all
used to
those.
work at, I had people that would come in and drop $100 a pop on their makeup. Like, they'd bring up 3 or 4 things, and $100 would go out of their bank account, and they didn't bat an eye, like, spending all that money on stuff they were gonna put on their face in the morning and wash it off at night. And I think of that. If you're going to think of porn as an addiction, well, isn't that an addiction too? Like, they can't even go out of their house without wearing it. But nobody wants to tell women that. But yeah, and
Oh,
I don't know Cruz's situation. I don't know if it was interfering with other aspects of his life or not. But I think most of the time when men get told they're addicted to porn, what's really going on is there's a woman in their life that is objects to their use of porn when as a substitute when she doesn't want to pay attention to them.
yeah.
So yeah.
All right. I gotta finish the PowerPoint. I gotta do like Ellen Page and get my head in the game. I gotta get my head back in the game. Okay, so
Don't get your head in the game too much. That's what Ellen did.
okay.
Yeah, she went right to the bottom of the bucket and came up with a lot.
All right, so Cruz
Shine on, Brian. Shine on.
finally, Cruz says he tells guys to look to themselves. It's scary, but when you're in a cult, you need deprogramming. That's the whole thing about being in a cult. You believe the lie. Projection. Thy name is Terry Crews.
What a great message to feminists. Oh, wait.
If you only knew. All right, so we're going to go on to the last story. This is actually not as funny or ragey. This is actually a pretty dark. So I want to.
If you've been having a good day, maybe tune this one out.
Yeah, I want to warn you guys. There are some strong images that you might find upsetting. I know that when my wife was putting together the PowerPoint, there was points where she got pretty emotional. So this is a tough one, but we have to cover it. So yeah, it's got some strong imagery. Just giving you a warning now. So the BBC has run a story called "Abused by My Girlfriend" about Alex Skeel. That's Skeel with a K, a 23-year-old man from Bedford who survived an abusive relationship with his girlfriend Jordan Worth. It's available to watch in the UK on iPlayer. Before I finish this, I should probably read people's super chats because tonally they're going to be pretty different, and I apologize for forgetting that. So, let's see. Matt, oh wait, let me just go back up here. Okay, Hoki Bukisa gives us $1.99 and says word hard in reference to Mr. Robato's previous tweet that we couldn't quite parse out. French Honey Badger gives us $2 and says only the jester from Deltarune can do anything. Master Rogue gives us $5 and says, after watching Hannah do her thing for all these years, I'm now convinced that she has the intelligence to win a singing contest with sign language. The DCV Titan gives us $10 Canadian and says, if you win, I lose. That is the entirety of the feminist mindset. Absolutely. If men get money for shelters, women lose. If a guy is accused of something, or if a guy accused of something is found innocent, women everywhere are in danger. Yes, that's right. It's a zero-sum game for them. Mr. Roboto gives us $5 and says, Hannah, which were you, a social butterfly or ponytail girl?
I was ponytail girl.
Yeah. She was like an athlete nerd, right?
It was very strange. I was like that kid on the fringes of just about every clique in school. I was never central to anything, and I kind of preferred it that way. So if that tells you anything, but I was more likely to be hiding behind a camera than a bunch of books.
Yeah. Q Brother Soulstar gives us $2. Oh, I'm sorry. There was more to Mr. Robato's message. Terry Crews' current state is not new, sadly. No. Q Brother Soulstar gives us $2 and says, Queen Bee hierarchy and control freak addiction. Yeah, micromanaging your whole life. And yeah, it's bad. Black Knight Fool gives us $5 Canadian and says, Terry's masculine persona has always been about mocking masculinity. It's his job to act as a pseudo representative for men on behalf of feminism. Okay.
I don't know about that. I don't know if it's always been about mocking masculinity.
In a way, masculinity is about mocking masculinity. Like part of it is we challenge each other. Like, yeah, if you're the best of friends with some guy, then they're never just going to accept your masculinity as perfect. They're going to rib you about whatever's personal, like forever, because they know that's what keeps you on your toes, right?
Guys do that because they're friends. They do it because they want to make each other better.
Yeah.
Not because they want to tear each other down. It's not like I must destroy his concept of his own masculinity.
Yeah, that's very different from women.
I think it's the way that men make each other stronger. That's definitely how they operate. You know, I did that show a while back where we looked at this study that was done about male happiness, and the thing is that all these narratives are on toxic masculinity, about competition and dominance and power. Men generally don't like that stuff. In fact, men who behave that way, most men reject, and they don't find it appealing at all. I mean, there are some men that think of things that way, sure, but they're not common, and it's not popular among men. Most men they're cooperative, not competitive. And if they are competitive, but the goal of competition is not to dominate, but to strengthen each other, especially if it's friendly competition. So,
you know, I've
in
seen men
cases, or whatever, it's actual psychopaths, but you can't isolate those as typical cases.
I've seen men strive to break down their enemies when they end up with somebody who's not just a rival but an out and out enemy. I've seen that, but that's a different story. And I've seen men in competition, you know, strive to psych each other out and stuff rather than psych each other up, and that's normal, natural competition as well. But there's a dramatic difference between that and the way women deal with each other. Most ordinary women who can be friends with each other, you know, they'll build each other up and lean on each other and everything. There's sort of in the upper classes in particular, and the more toward the social butterfly end of the spectrum, the concept of frenemies comes from women whose friendship is built on preparing to sabotage each other, tear each other down, being ready to pounce the minute the other person's guard is down, seeking to destroy each other, and enjoying the competition. And it's kind of, women will build friendships on I am going to eat you alive. And it's very odd, and I haven't quite got the hang of it ever. But I've been subject to it more than once, and I've attempted to keep up with it. And again, it's just a very different attitude toward the other person. It's not healthy competition at all. Relational aggression is very self-damaging as much as it is the other person that you're competing against, and it sort of changes your psyche.
You might call it toxic.
Yeah, it's very
might
toxic.
Call it toxic feminine.
Poisonous. Like it's out and out poisonous. And I think men who get dosed with a lot of feminist ideology might start to view things through the feminist lens, the feminist filter that treats all competition that way.
Mm-hmm.
and they sort of see that in the same way. But
Well, yeah, because that's why they
there is a
see
very big
other.
difference.
Yeah, they see other men as a threat, and because they've been fed that line about, well, all men are a threat unless you're one of the special men that isn't. And of course, all feminist men don't believe that they are. They think they're the good men. And so they have to, this is just like the Gillette ad, Terry Crews says men have to hold other men accountable. This is what he wants. This is what he thinks it should be like. And the idea of this is to set men against men. And that's what the ad shows. Men opposing other men, Women are just sort of like floating through the ad. They're not really, they don't have agency at all. They're just kind of there as the object, if you really think about it. And this is what Terry Crews is asking. He's essentially pretending as though women have no impact on any of this dynamic at all, and that all the men, they just have to become as enlightened and free from the cult, as he calls it, as he is. And it's quite nefarious because he's living in upside down clown world.
And I think part of it is the way we view things. Like, when men do something bad, that gets designated as masculinity, right? He did it because he's male. When women do something bad, there's something wrong with them, and it's probably because of something that happened to them or something somebody did to them that broke them.
A man probably did something to them.
Probably a man. And it goes back to that, men are actors, women are acted upon, right?
It's
but
Maleficent.
that is
wrapped up in a nutshell. It's the Maleficent movie.
right.
Yeah.
And it's that underlying thing, how we view dysfunction in the sexes. When men are dysfunctional, it's their masculinity. When women are dysfunctional, it's because somebody did something to them and broke them. So I think that's the feminist attitude toward the genders in a nutshell, and it's what he's being taught and what he's trying to rationalize.
That's what's happening. He's just applying that to his talks, and he's not saying anything new. He's a big burly black guy saying it. So thank you for the super chats, but we really got to get to the next story because I know we got a late start and I got an after show to do. So and this is like the big one. So continuing from where we left off, again, viewer discretion is advised. Okay, what we're gonna look at now is from the BBC article about the abused by my girlfriend story. Okay, Alex says in the first months of the couple getting together, everything was fine. However, a few months in, some strange behaviors began to emerge. Alex's parents paid for them to see The Lion King in London when Jordan appeared. They were all looking for her for a while, finally finding her in the reception area and laughing about it. Alex believed it was just attention seeking. Jordan then went on to isolate him from his friends and family and even took over his Facebook account. Things got worse as Jordan would deny him food. Jordan is the girlfriend, so you know. Okay. From the article, quote, I try and challenge her behavior, but she'd turn it on me and find a way to make me the problem. I'd know it wasn't my fault, but she'd keep convincing me. You end up thinking, what am I doing wrong? We had 2 kids together, and I just kept hoping that something would change. While she didn't hurt them directly, my fear was, always, that if I left, she'd turn her abuse on them. So I stayed. It took 18 months for the mental abuse to turn physical. Jordan would wait until he had fallen asleep, and then smack him with a glass bottle, demanding to know what he was thinking about. Alex explains, quote, after a while, it got to the point where it didn't even hurt anymore. I was so used to the pain, I didn't even feel it. So she'd ramp it up to the next level and find a worse way of hurting me. After the bottle, it was a hammer. One time, it was a laptop charger. She wrapped the cord around her wrist, but with a bit of slack, and swung the metal plug end at my head. This is in the UK, so the plugs are like big and chunky, so you know
they
what's
work
coming.
properly, damn it. They are best plugs.
Yeah, so she would swing the metal plug end at my head. Eventually, Jordan started with knives. She'd slash at me. One time she just missed a major artery in my wrist. After that, it was boiling water. I had third-degree burns. And here's some images.
Is this all from Tell Me What You're Thinking? Like,
The
is this the links you'll go to find out what he's thinking? Because bear that in mind, ladies, because it's only fucking ladies who do this. The "What Are You Thinking" game. Guys never do this with each other. I don't know if women do it with each other, but women do it to their boyfriends and husbands all the fucking time. And you know, it's quite possible that it can come across as creepy if you do it too much. It's cute at first for new couples and shit, but after a while, it's what y'all would call creepy if a man did it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is what a woman can do in a domestic violence situation. Look at that. I mean, I know this is hard to look at, but look at the stitches. Look at the cut she did to his wrist. Look at the burns on his arm. Okay? That's fucked, man. All right. So Jordan started with knives. She'd slash at me. One time she just missed a major artery in my wrist. She could have killed him. After that, it was boiling water. I had third-degree burns. He continues, I was scared of Jordan and what she would do. I felt that if I'd say anything, she could have killed me. I'd go to the hospital and say I'd tripped and hit my head, or that very hot water from the shower had burned me. A neighbor called the police a few times when they heard shouting, and I'd make excuses for Jordan and lie. Doctors told me that I'd been 10 days from death because I'd been denied food for so long, and my injuries were so bad. It all came to an end in 2018 when a police officer came around the house to follow up on their previous visit and questioned me. All the horrible truth had come out, so she was denying him food too, and he almost starved to death. Jordan was never sorry. She pleaded guilty in court, I believe, to get a lighter sentence. Jordan was the first woman in the UK to go to prison for coercive and controlling behavior, sentenced to 7.5 years in prison in April of 2018. For the year ending March 2018, the crime survey for England and Wales reported 2 million adults aged 16 to 59 years had experienced domestic abuse, estimating over 1/3 to be men. Skeel had help from male domestic abuse charities and says in the future he'd like to open a refuge for men who have been abused.
The first woman to go to prison for coercive and controlling behavior in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even what
any of them were guilty of it before that and have just got away with it.
Yeah, it's not even what feminists wanted when they fought for that to become part of the law. They were probably mad that it was applied to a woman's behavior. And they just probably, I imagine they are afraid to speak up about that because obviously, you know, this case, the evidence is there and you can see that it was needed. But I'm certain that in a lot of cases they wouldn't want to acknowledge this. And this would fall under, because there's nothing in here about him defending himself.
No, it doesn't.
So this would fall under that.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
this would fall under that percentage, that 2/3 of unilateral domestic violence that is perpetrated by women. Like 2/3 of bilateral, of two-way domestic violence is initiated by women. 2/3 of domestic violence that only goes one way, only one perpetrator is the perpetrator is a woman. And you know, and I think in a lot of cases it never gets bad enough that the guy gets help, that it becomes obvious what she's doing is abuse, to even people who will discount female violence and female coercion and female aggression because the woman is the one engaging in it. And I'm betting that there are probably a lot of men out there that put up with behavior that is what this guy experienced in the beginning, and they figure that that's just what you put up with in a relationship with a woman. So, like, I know a lot of people are wondering why he didn't leave, but with, in particular, generations after Generation X, like Generation X had it to a degree, but after Generation X, it seems like there was this big thing of women are wonderful hitting the point where women can do no wrong.
Yeah.
And the idea that if she's abusing you, you must have done something to piss her off became not just, you know, a mantra, but an actual shield against any kind of repercussions for
Real,
women who are openly abusive.
He was only
real quick, Anna.
23, so go
Yeah.
ahead, Mike.
Guys can't
Real quick,
at that age.
he said why he didn't want to leave because he was afraid she would start abusing the children.
And he can't take the children because he's a
Exactly.
man.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
UK doesn't treat fathers as parents in a case of their children. If there's a divorce in the UK, paternal custody is not really a thing. Like, there are a few fathers who might get custody if the mother openly tries to kill the children and social services finds out. But you don't have like in the US where you can go for custody and the court will consider you a parent and consider the other parent. You don't even have that. You know, it's not just tough to get custody, it's damn near impossible. And so he really didn't have any recourse there. But at the other end of it, you also have, before it got bad enough for him to consider whether he should leave or not, you can guarantee there were red flags that he did not see as red flags, because men of the younger generations have been taught that it is misogynistic to vet women for character. You can't judge a woman who lies to you as a liar because that's misogynistic.
Yep.
You can't judge a disloyal woman and call her a slut or a whore for cheating on you because that's misogynistic. Right? You can't take a woman who is an absolute shrew. You can't call her a shrew. You can't call her a bitch or a cunt because that's misogynistic. She can think all those things of you and say all those things of you if you act that way. But how many guys of Generation Y and younger were taught by their parents that they should be careful what kind of women they associated with, what kind of character those women had? You know, how many Gen Xers taught their boys instead, be a gentleman and you'll get loved. And if you're not being loved, if you're being mistreated by women, it's because you weren't a gentleman. You know, this is part of the problem. It never should have gotten to the point where he stayed because he was afraid she'd abuse the children. It should have ended at the first red flag, the first abusive behavior.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't see abusive behavior as abusive behavior if you're not allowed to judge women on their behavior.
But toxic masculinity, though, that's the problem, guys. It's toxic masculinity. That's the thing we should be concerning ourselves with. Also, there's probably guys, you know, like Terry Crews, like those kinds of guys that would say that this guy is weak because he put up with that, when, you know, he was clearly in a situation where there wasn't much he could do. Like, if he hit her, she could have gone to the police and used them against him. And this happens all the time. She broke some teeth. That wasn't in the write-up, but she broke some of his teeth. Probably with that bottle while he slept. But there are x-rays of him with missing teeth, like broken teeth. Oh, it's just, I can't even, that hurts just to think about. Also, she's not only being sentenced because of controlling and coercive behavior. That's just something that she's being convicted of. That's a first for women in the UK, but rather she's being, it's also because of wounding with intent and causing grievous bodily harm, since she did cut his wrist with a knife and burn him with scalding hot water, I think from a tea kettle. You know, it's the UK, so. As well as breaking his teeth. Yeah, he's just had all the things happen to him, so. Yeah. Yeah, she broke his teeth. There's an X-ray. It's fucked. And this is the thing too. You look at her. She's an attractive young woman. It's not what people usually think of, but just, you know, because they're pretty, that doesn't mean they're not fucking crazy. So just be known. And I don't know if you saw a pattern whenever we don't do a lot of these anymore, because I try not to overdo the domestic violence stories or like the teachers fucking their student stories, because they happen so often. But I don't know if you noticed the pattern that when they do happen, they tend to be attractive young women that are doing it. So anybody else have any thoughts on this story? I wonder if there's any super chats there are.
There's at least one thought in the story.
Yeah. I wouldn't even go so far. I think thoughts, they're just trying to make a buck. They're not here doing all this shit though.
This isn't thoughterry. This is some goddamn anime yandere shit.
To be honest, attractive women get away with a lot of shit.
Yeah, they do.
And I've been on both sides of that. So, like when I was younger and everything, attractive women get away with a lot. Being attractive gets you out of a lot. And people have a tendency, and it probably is the same way for men. I mean, I think that was what Ted Bundy used, was that he looked harmless and at least moderately attractive, and so when he would come up and ask for help, women's guard would go down. So it's it's that way with both sexes. Attractiveness, like
That's
we have a
just
tendency to
neoteny
let
that
it.
does it. And
Yeah,
neoteny in general is a trait of women more so
more than men. Yeah. But we tend to let our guard down around attractive people. And it that's another, actually, if you want to go back to the Hollywood thing, that's another problem with Hollywood, is you have that situation where people do tend to let their guard down around attractive people. And obviously Harvey Weinstein isn't conventionally attractive at all, so that's not
yeah, but he has
who I'm
status and
referring to.
power. But yeah, you're
But
talking
he has
about actual
status and
stars.
power, and
Yeah.
But I mean, things
some
that you're
have
attracted to.
some have
But
less power than they used to. But yeah,
there are Hollywood stars though that have been accused that are attractive people.
Oh, for
in
sure.
general, and there are producers that have been accused that their features are conventionally attractive, and that does create a tendency, like parents might be more likely to trust that person with their children, especially if they're in a position of responsibility. So, and people are less likely to believe you when you complain about something that an attractive person did to you, and that may have factored into his situation as well. People might have been like, "Oh, I can't believe that about her. She's such a cutie pie. She's so sweet. Why would she do anything like that?"
Yeah. No, they definitely do have that. And also, it's also important to point out that there was a lot of like gaslighting and like psychological abuse that was going on before the physical abuse. So he was talking about how she was doing these really manipulative things to him that put him in a position where he felt guilty, like where she would say, tell him that he was guilty of doing things and his fault, was his fault. And then he would actually question that. According to his testimony, he would say, well, am I doing something wrong? And I wouldn't be surprised if he was kind of like a bit of a white knight himself, that thought that because his girlfriend is female, young, attractive, and the mother to his kids, that she couldn't have the capacity to be the person that she really was. And I think that he probably did a lot of compartmentalizing until like the abuse got physical. The one thing that there was real gaslighting going on. The one thing I guess I was wondering about is that, and Lindsay was asking me this too, how was she able to deny him food? How was she able to starve him, basically? Like that he couldn't just go get something or order takeout or whatever. I don't know what the specifics are of that, but I'm curious about that. But yeah, I mean, it's fucked up.
I think these things might be covered in the documentary.
Yeah, I might have to watch the documentary.
she was extremely controlling, it's entirely possible that he didn't get a whole lot of time away from her. You know, aside from being maybe at work, if he worked, he wouldn't have access to communication away from her, because it talked about her isolating him from friends and family. If she also isolated him from independent communication, maybe he wasn't allowed to control his own phone, things like that. He wouldn't be able to do that. And the other thing is, controlling individual that gaslights you and engages in passive aggressive punishment type behavior. You could have a full fruit basket out on the table with all kinds of tempting things in it, and he might have been afraid to eat because of the punishment she would visit on him afterwards. When somebody engages in that kind of coercive, controlling behavior, they can wield a level of control that on a person that is just the same as, when you train a dog to hold its snack on its nose until you say go or give whatever keyword you're supposed to give, and then the dog can eat. And the same thing will happen to a person. They'll lose their human independence in the face of that level of coercion and control, where there is a punishment that just makes it not worth it. And if he didn't leave because he was afraid she would abuse the kids, there's every possibility it's because the threat was there. I mean, imagine if you knew every time you had a sandwich, she was going to do something rotten to your children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You
Makes
wouldn't
sense. You just hold out.
Yeah.
All right. So I will read the last couple of super chats here. Well, there's only one super chat. And I guess we'll go into the after show. So Tyler Preston gives us $5 and says, feminists are going to use this story for their benefit. The reason why male victims of domestic violence don't report it is because of the masculinity, or more accurately, the toxic masculinity, which is really just the masculinity. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to be a thing. Well, it's toxic masculinity that kept him from calling. He thought he could just tough it out. Fucking assholes, man. Well, anyway, we're just going to go into the after show. We're going to be talking about this story called Enough is Enough as soon as it loads, because this webpage or website kind of sucks. I'm done waiting, and it's about an angry woman, apparently, that's done waiting for you to respond to their messages and calls. It should be an interesting little listicle.
And it will be a lot more fun than this last story, we promise.
Yes,
but does that mean she'll leave me alone now?
Well, of course not.
No, she's not at all done. She's
done waiting, but she's not done nagging.
She's not done talking. That's exactly right. So in the meantime, I guess we'll go ahead and get out of here, but I just want to ask you guys a question. How many ladybugs were sacrificed to make this shirt? Oh shit. If the Predator looked at this, it would go blind. All right, so we're going to go into the after show.
Maybe she has a head for fashion.
She has a head for fashion. That's right.
And probably 5 or 7 other things.
So we're going to go into the after show. But one last reminder. Again, we are doing the International Conference on Men's Issues 2019. It's going to be in August, right? Mid-August, 16th through 18th. It's going to be a good time. If you want to be a part of the action, there's lots of different price packages. And there's an early bird sale, so you get the best price. If you want more information, you got to sign up. So join the ICMI 2019 in Chicago mailing list. Just give us your name and your email, and we'll basically keep you up to date on all the latest information regarding that. There's going to be a lot of great people there. We got Paul, we got Janice Fiamengo, we got Tom Golden, we got all kinds of people coming. It's going to be a lot of great people here. And if you've always wanted to come out to one and you live in the United States, there is no better place to come than MAGA country itself, Chicago. Bring a rope and your own bleach, and we will do the ICMI up. Especially, I'm gonna try and get the Hodge twins and get them to dress up like these two guys from the Jussie Smollett story. I think it'd be perfect. But anyway, I will try to get the Hodge twins though.
They do it too.
They would. They would, wouldn't they? So we're going to go to the after show. I want to thank you guys so much for coming on and hanging out for the news show and also dealing with our technical issues that we had with OBS in the beginning, which I apologize for. I want to thank the two Mikes and Hannah for coming on with me to talk about these stories. And yeah, if you want to be a part of the after show, you know what you got to do. You got to go to feedthebadger.com and set up a monthly subscription. Whatever you want to give, but I think even at the lowest level, you get into the Discord. And so like you'll be at least to be able to hang out with us in there. So please consider doing that and making yourself into a badger because we need more badgers in the world. We need to swarm this place with badgers, and that's what we intend to do. So once again, my name has been Brian, and I was here with Hannah and the two Mikes, and we're going to get out of here. Thanks for coming on the news show, and we'll talk to you guys in the next one.